Welcome to the Korean Cultural Centre's book club. My name's Harry Jun and I'll be one of the hosts tonight. I'm zooming in from Eora Nation and I'd like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the land in which the First Nations people have shared and passed down stories for thousands of years, the land that always was and always will be Aboriginal land. The Korean Cultural Centre, or the KCC, opened in April 2011 to introduce the appeal of Korean culture to Australians, with a mission to connect our two countries by deepening our cultural bond. The KCC offers a variety of cultural programs such as the Korean Book Club, cultural classes, which include the Korean cooking class, K-pop dance classes, Korean language classes, art exhibitions, film screenings, and performances. The Korean Book Club was launched in March 2020 to cover a variety of Korean literary works, delving into various subjects with each edition. This year commemorates the 60th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Australia and the Republic of Korea. The KCC planned a variety of events this year, but unfortunately, due to the current lockdown in Greater Sydney, many of them were postponed. However, we are lucky to host the Korean Book Club for the novel Almond for you today. I'll be having a conversation about Almond with Dr. Song-hae Lee soon. Dr. Song-hae Lee is a lecturer at Macquarie University, and her major research is on fiction, film, and TV dramas of East Asia, with a particular focus on Korea. I hope all of you enjoy the book club today. Dr. Song-hae Lee, are you there? Oh, I think your video and your mic is muted.
Okay.
Hi, there you are. Yeah. Good to see you.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll be starting our discussion. And I just want to welcome everyone who's joined the Zoom today. I can see the chat. I've seen a lot of people zooming in from all over the country, actually. We've got Donna Stewart from Brisbane, Carrie Hughes from Alice Springs. It's so great that we can all join together just to have a chat about this novel. And it'd be great to know as well, those of you who have read the novel, if you've read it, or even if you haven't, we actually have a special treat for anyone who hasn't even had a copy of the book yet, which we'll talk about at the end of the talk. But yeah, how are you, Song-hae?
I'm good, and you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Did you, first of all, I suppose, I've got the copy of the book here, Almond by Won-pyung Sohn. And I guess we should start with a rough outline of the plot. It is about a boy called Yunjae, who we discover was born with a smaller amygdala, which is the part of the brain that is responsible for controlling, or I guess responding to emotions and understanding emotions. And so it is his journey through. It's like a coming of age story of him coming to terms with this inability to process emotions. And I quite enjoyed the book. Did you enjoy the book, Dr. Lee?
Yes. In the first place, I wasn't quite sure, but then, as you read along, so the characters become more complicated, and then was more interesting.
Yeah, it started quite in a confronting way. And I mean, part of me, I was the same as you, I think, in the beginning, where I wondered if this was going to be sort of a cliched coming of age story about teenagers and growing up and stuff that we've read before. But it started out very engaging, in a very engaging way. And I just got attached to the characters as well. And I thought the writing style of the author was very straightforward, but the chapters are quite small and structured in a way that just makes you devour the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed it quite a lot. How did you feel about the character's condition?
So you means me here, right? Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
So I'll just touch on the main themes, maybe. There's a lot of themes here, but the main themes, in my understanding of the book, are communication and empathy. So everything seems to hinge on theory of mind.
Yeah.
Also known as mentalizing ability. that is the ability to attribute to another or to oneself mental states such as beliefs, intents, desires, emotions, and knowledge that are different from one's own. So possessing a functional theory of mind is considered crucial for success in everyday human social interactions and is used when analyzing, judging, and inferring the behavior of others.
Yeah, and that's so important.
What is the consequence of not feeling empathy with others? So
yeah, that's huge.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, the book is pursuing this kind of question, I think.
Yeah. And for those of you who haven't read the book yet, so the novel is written in first person from the perspective of Yunjae, who is the child that's has it's called Alexithymia, which makes it a lot harder for him to understand emotions. And so we get to stand in his shoes and experience what it's like to see the world without an understanding of emotion, a core understanding of emotion. It feels like almost like an entire sense has been taken away from you. And I thought the author did a very great job of painting that picture.
Yes. So the personality type most widely identified as lacking in empathy is the psychopath, right?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. The book introduces such a character in Steel Wire, you remember? At the end.
Yeah.
And then this figure is part of the schematic constructiveness of the book's set of characters.
Wow.
So one of its important functions is to ensure that the readers don't confuse Yunjae's deficiency of empathy with psychopathy. So Yunjae is not a psychopath.
Yeah, it is important.
Yeah,
to make that distinction. Yeah.
Yes.
I think especially because, he's the protagonist and also he's a kid as well. We have such a strong connection and that idea of innocence. And it would be a shame for us to feel a bit detached from a character who's morally, or I guess amoral, like if he was committing crimes or I think being extra violent, we'd feel a bit uncomfortable, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not at the point in my life where I have children, but I feel like this novel will be even more powerful for those who do have children, because that sort of painful journey of the mother trying to provide for her child who has these challenges put before him, and acknowledging neurodiversity and all ranges of experiencing the world. It's all legitimate, but the frustration that the mother goes through in trying to protect and bring up her child. Do you remember there's a scene where she's sort of discovering that her son has a smaller amygdala, and she goes to the doctors and they want to make him into this sort of research subject, and she very aggressively, defensively says no, there's nothing wrong with my child. What's wrong with you? How dare you? I'll take care of him and I'll look after him myself. And although I understood and empathized with that response, I felt like it would be even more powerful as a parent.
Yes, and I think even if it's not actually uniquely to Korea, but Korean culture subscribes to the metaphor, society is a family. So what is suggested about society when all families are broken?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so you will have noticed that every family in the book is depicted as deficient in some way. So they are mostly presented as incomplete. And even Dora's family.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dora's family, parents and a child, is deficient in that the parents are unable or unwilling to emphasize with Dora's hopes and aspirations, right?
Yeah, and I think that is such a beautiful theme to touch on, this idea of otherness and how it permeates through all cultures and societies where we have to, I think we have to learn to normalize this idea that we are fractured. We're all fractured in a certain way, and the main characters in the book kind of come together in their fracturedness. They're all have Gon comes from a broken family. Dora her parents are a bit estranged from her passion of running. Yunjae has difficulty relating to others' emotions, and they're drawn to each other like this magnet. And I think even not experiencing the same things ourselves, we can still connect with these characters. I thought that was very powerful.
Yeah.
And we have more alike than we have, like, there's more things that bring us together in similarities than our differences.
Yeah. The other thing is family is important for establishing social networks.
Yes.
Social behavior, right?
Absolutely.
Social network theory argues that social behavior is brought about mainly through social ties and connections. Yunjae's mother and grandmother strive to teach him to simulate social behavior.
Yeah, yeah.
And to simulate the behavior an everyday child might evolve by imitating the behavior of others.
That's right. There's that. There's a part of the novel where so an example of the challenges that Yunjae faces is his inability to feel fear, and so he sees there's this. It's I think a classical scientific experiment, but there's the idea that if a child sees a kettle that's boiling hot and then touches it and burns themselves, they've learnt that to avoid that danger. But that same scenario, if it happened to Yunjae, he would touch it over and over and over again because he doesn't
have fear at all.
That's right. Yeah. And so his mum and his grandma, and you're so right about the family units and this idea of social conditioning, or we learn our social skills because there's his mum goes to great lengths to teach him. She has to actually explicitly teach him all these skills that we inherently have in terms of social interactions. She's got all those, remember she has the paper and she writes all these different scenarios.
When
if a car is coming.
Smile back, things like that, right?
That's, yeah, when someone smiles, you smile back. And then at the end, the little cheat that she wrote at the end is usually you should try and copy the other person's emotion. And yeah, I thought that...
the question becomes more complicated, right?
Of course.
That if somebody gives you food, you have to be appreciative. But what if they give you a bad food? Things like that, right? Yeah,
exactly. All the little social nuances that we pick, it all happens in the background of our brains. But then when someone doesn't understand that innately, it's almost a different language to try and teach it. Because even we don't know. Sometimes we don't know how to explain why we do things. I remember I had... I was in high school and I was in the mall and I ran into one of my dad's friends, and because I'm Korean but I was born and raised in Australia, and I saw him and I said hello, hi, and I waved. And when I got home, my dad was like, "What happened at the mall today?" And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" And he goes, "About my friend told me that you're being very rude to him." And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I said hello. And he's like, "Oh, you didn't bow." And I thought, oh my goodness, no, I wasn't trying to be rude. But then that explicit sort of teaching of like the social and cultural norms and this idea of being polite, sometimes it can also almost seem silly when we try and explicitly teach that to someone, the logic behind it. But obviously, as you grow up, you understand what's acceptable and what isn't.
But you are actually culturally Australian, right?
I think,
Korean, but culturally Australian. So maybe as an Australian, it's just natural. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, I definitely didn't mean any offense, but that idea, I just love the idea of like having to explain the social nuances to someone who doesn't innately understand it. And I love the contrast between Gon and Yunjae in that respect as well, where Yunjae is this sort of has a numbed approach to emotions. He finds it very difficult, and he's drawn to Gon, who through a life of hardship is a very sensitive soul. He's a very sensitive boy, and he acts out a lot and is very emotional. Like he has several violent outbursts. And
but actually that reminds me of the author's strategies. Actually, I noticed there are two strategies of the authors.
Oh yeah,
he used in this book to make its main themes apparent. Actually, so what you are talking about is actually one of the strategies that is the patterning of characters.
Patterning of characters.
Yeah, it's based on contrasts. So as you say, Yunjae and Gon, they are in utter contrast, and then mother and grandmother. And Dr. Shim and Professor Yun, they are really different, right?
There's always this binary setup, isn't there?
Oppositions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really quite distinct.
Yeah, I love how for Yunjae, he's got, like, with his friends at least, he's got Gon. It's like the angel and the devil on the shoulders. He's got Gon and Dora, where they both represent different sides of emotion.
Yes, yeah. Dora also, you can say she's kind of close to Gon because she cannot be really at rest, right? She's so restless.
Yeah.
So you can say ADHD or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that as well, because she and then that, in that sense of otherness, right? She doesn't seem to belong, or doesn't feel. I think that's why she's drawn to Yunjae as well, because he clearly stands out. He's getting bullied at school. All these rumors are thrown out around about him, and Dora, I think she identifies a kinship with him, where she's like, this kid is not being accepted into the group, and I don't feel like I'm accepted to the group as well. We've got a couple people in chat saying some lovely things and really poignant points. Melanie says that this sounds like a beautiful story. As a mum of 2 young children, I would love to read Almond. Yeah, I highly recommend you read it. Denise. Yeah. Denise says, reminds me a little of how the protagonist in Convenience Store Woman, who hasn't got this type of condition, imitates people be perceived as normal. Her sister teaches her. Yeah, I've read that novel. Yeah, it's very similar in that take as well. Granny and the mum's simulations and exercises have set up Yunjae's moral compass. That's right. Yeah. Because that has to be taught to him. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So can I just talk about the strategies? One of the other strategies.
Yes, please.
And I thought that the way point of view is used, that was really fascinating. So the Sohn Won-pyung has chosen to tell this story in the first person, past tense, entirely from Yunjae's point of view, that he can choose what to tell and how to tell it. Is flagged on the first page. You remember he said, I won't tell you whether it has a happy ending or a tragic ending. So a couple of questions. What is the effect of this narrator positioning? How does it shape the reader's understanding of Yunjae himself? Things like that. It's really quite intriguing. As well as the other character in the novel. How does the way Yunjae depicts the other characters differ from the way we deduce they see themselves? Does the writing make Yunjae more eloquent as he grows up? I think whenever I read it, I thought, is this the boy who has, what do you call it, alexithymia? But he looks quite mature, right? He's going to be really mature. But you can say maybe it's a coming of age story again too.
Yeah. It is funny how I suppose it's implying that if you took all the sort of emotional aspects of teenagers, do they suddenly become mature? But it also calls into this question the idea of maturity. Like, is it more mature to be less emotional? And maybe it's if we look at it in terms of like gender norms, like, is a man supposed to be stoic and emotionless, or but that's a fantastic way to look at it from the perspective of someone that does not process emotions like others do. Yeah.
So you agree that it's a coming of age story, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Because it covers a person's life from infancy to the age of 18, and then also there's he was 20 years old, right?
Yeah,
So I think I found about 3 episodes, among others, that express this. This is what do you call it? The age of, what do you call it?
Coming of age?
Coming of age, thank you.
Yeah.
So the first is the butterfly incident. Do you remember that?
Yes, with Gon,
one. It's in chapter 44. That reveals much about the emotional states of both Yunjae and Gon. It is explicitly about empathy and theory of mind, and establishes that Yunjae's maturation pivots on the development of these capacities. So Gon's point as he tortures the butterfly is that Yunjae needs to go beyond understanding that the butterfly feels pain, so that he feels empathy with that pain.
Yeah.
And then when afterwards Yunjae asks Dr. Shim, you remember Dr. Shim?
Yes, his mentor,
Will I live like this my entire life, feeling nothing at all? And then the reply is that asking the question is itself a first step. Okay?
Yeah, that's right. The curiosity that blossoms that's right.
The development. Okay?
Yeah.
And then
he's so lucky to have those guiding figures. Yeah, he I mean, throughout the novel, he looks to other people to support him, and I think that teaches a very important lesson in that, you know, all of us can learn from this, and we can all teach and learn from each other, and it really is this survival instinct in us to rely on others and socialize with others. Right.
So what do you think about I think it's the second incident, maybe. It's the encounter with Dora in chapters 55 and 56, where the wind blows her hair against his face.
Yeah.
And then a common component of coming-of-age stories is that the protagonist's first crush on a relationship, which is what he experienced here from her scent and tactile moment, I would say.
Yes.
And when he reports, I think in the page here, a heavy rock dropped down in my heart. So he expresses a metaphor, actually.
Yeah.
Although in describing it as an unpleasant weight, he's still unaware that he's channeling a familiar way to refer to love as pain or illness, fever. So the illness he suffers all night is the emotions of obsession and desire. Okay, so love is like a fever, I think, after all. This experience is the first turning point, although it still demonstrates Yunjae's Alexithymia. So what he's thinking is he feels the emotion, expresses it metaphorically, but is unable to interpret it effectively. So, this is a good example of readers. Readers understand more than the narrator.
Yeah, that kind of dramatic irony. I really love how the author has chosen to use that figurative language to describe the emotion, because it's almost like we already know the answer. We know that he's falling in love, but the way he does it through the lens of a teenage boy that can't process these emotions in the same way is very fascinating. Like you said, he says he's got like a fever and has like a headache and just like he doesn't know how to feel and how to respond to it.
But he feels the emotion, but he doesn't know what it is, right?
Yeah, exactly. And he goes home and he's like, I think I'm sick or whatever.
So again, Dr. Shim has the role of interpreting the emotion.
Right? Yes, that's right.
As a crush, maybe he said.
Yeah.
And then I think narratively, it doesn't matter that the potential love relation between Yunjae and Dora just fizzles out. I think some readers will say, oh, it's a disappointment that their love is not really flourished or something. But especially in the coming of age schema, the first love relationship usually comes to nothing, but is important for the character's development. Yeah.
For sure. Oh, we've got some input in the chat. Sonia S says, parts of the book were so heartbreaking that I wouldn't have been able to continue reading if they were told by a protagonist with a, in quotes, normal spectrum of emotions. But because the protagonist of Almond doesn't feel emotions and just tells us what happens as it is, they were easier to take in. Yeah, there is a bit of clinical sort of detachment from the emotional side of it. Which does make it easier to process. That's a fascinating insight, and Timothy Scott says, if you think about it, we grow up learning all these social cues and emotions throughout our lives. Yunjae has been taught so much from a short age, so understands the full complexity earlier. Oh, yeah. I suppose because his mother and Dr. Shim have sort of had to present it to him explicitly, he has to kind of delve into more depth of these emotions, whereas a lot of us who instinctively feel it, we might not have to explore it deeply.
Yeah. So I was a bit impressed when he thought, what would mother do when the mother was in coma in the hospital, and then he interprets that his mother would love him to go to school rather than tipping her over every 2 hours or something, right? Yeah. So I thought that was one of the development, maybe, or was the result of the training by mother and grandmother.
Yeah, it does delve into the that idea of sort of like the plasticity of the brain, how because this idea that your brain can kind of keep learning and changing over time, I think is interesting as well. And when it pairs up with his puberty, like a stage of life where you're growing at such a rapid rate, it's interesting to see any kind of changes that might happen to him as he grows up and his ability to perceive emotions.
Yes, it's like empathy is not innate.
No.
It's just developed by the relationship with other people, right? That's why.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's sort of the guidance that we have from people more competent than us.
So the newborn babies, they are so, what do you call it, selfish and okay, so the world only exists for them, right? Not,
I think Denise said that earlier in the chat. Children are born selfish. They all need to be taught a moral compass and socialized.
So it's only the world exists for them, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes I think these the questions, the authors, what is the author's goal in writing the book? She wrote in the end, right? At the end,
that's right.
Notes. So what ideas was she trying to illustrate? So what message was she trying to send? So focus on the young people, right? Like Yunjae, Gon, and Dora might point to a primary concern with the shared humanity of those who seem different. We talked about it already, right? Different. Otherness and things like that. So I mentioned at the beginning that communication was a major theme, and this can hinge on differences between utterance and understanding. So I think the most shocking instance for me to read was the incident in chapters 2 and 3 when Yunjae witnesses another child beaten to death. It illustrates a failure in empathy, but also in communication. So his attempt to tell the shopkeeper what has happened fails to communicate because he states the fact simply, and his expression lacks emotion or urgency, maybe. Okay?
Yeah.
So the author is here drawing attention to a gap between what language denotes or states and what it connotes or implies.
That's right. Yeah, he thinks the shopkeeper just thinks he's being silly or sarcastic or whatever and just brushes it off. Yeah.
The often noted tendency of an autistic child to understand language as only literal in meaning is quite relevant.
Yeah.
So you remember the author illustrates it a little differently at the end of chapter 3 with the sequence weird, special, different, and adorable little monster.
Yeah, that's right.
To Yunjae. Okay.
Yeah.
So the monster is actually two monsters, what they say is one is quite ironical, I think.
For sure. Yeah, his grandma calls him like her little monster.
Little monster or something like that.
And Denise has said in the chat, coming of age is even interesting as a concept because we think of young people, but then we could go through that at different stages of life. And you're absolutely, that's a very interesting take on, because we assume that a coming of age happens,
That leads to my third important schema or maybe episode. It's the experience of some kind of rite of passage, I think. When the protagonist is separated from the everyday world, undergoes an unusual experience, and is reintegrated as substantially or symbolically new person. That is the hero's journey, we know.
Yes.
Yeah. This occurs when Yunjae goes to rescue Gon and is tortured by steel wire. As this happens, he recalls the butterfly incident and the murder of his grandmother and begins to understand feelings. And then he says, I think at last I became a human.
Yeah.
This is the end of my story, he says. So through rite of passage, I think he was grown up, he developed, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, it is alarming and almost sad that it had to come to such a dramatic and violent point for him to grow into this human being. But it was a catalyst for his emotional growth, and Gon symbolizing that emotional growth as a person, as his friend, was really important as well. We also Catriona says, Melanie, who agrees with Denise, says, yes, I agree, Denise. We learn to understand more about different aspects of life when we experience it ourselves, for example, loss and grief. And then Catriona says, I thought it was interesting that although Yunjae is emotionless, in quotes, he seems more human than many other people in his world, like the children who bully him, for example. Yeah, it's sort of like, I guess, he goes against the current in terms of emotions, but in terms of humanity, he seems to show a bit more. Maybe due to the objectivity of his lack of emotion, he's able to view things in a more logical manner. whereas kids can be, as we have said, selfish and self-centered.
As people say, because people are so exposed to a lot of violence and everything, tragedies, whatever, so they are kind of numb now. So what's the difference between the Yunjae's state and then the people's, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's and I mean, when as it's set, I mean, a lot of it is set during his high school years, and that sort of turbulent time in your life where you're constantly worried about what other people think of you.
Yes.
And it's kind of that shapes who you are in a way, because you start to act in a way that impresses the people you value, and you start to reject the people that you don't like. And I guess that's why people say that school is one of the most formative times of your life. But then when you present a character who really doesn't care at all, he can't care at all what other people think. It's fascinating to see how that character grows through school. And then you've got Gon, who's the opposite end of that, who he's almost like he walks into school as the delinquent, and he knows that he has this bad reputation, and he's quite sensitive about it, but then he plays it up, and he'll upturn the desks and do all this stuff, and is so sensitive about his reputation.
Yes, but the author herself says that love is the most important thing, so it can create monsters.
Yeah, right.
Example, so Yunjae, even though he's deficient of all these empathy, whatever, was poured by love by grandmother and mother, and trying to be ordinary or normal, whatever. Okay? But then look at Gon. Okay?
Yeah.
He was raised as devoid of love. So I can understand him, how he behaves like that.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, he had quite a traumatic introduction to the book. And of course, that would affect someone's development because, with Yunjae becoming that sort of surrogate son for Gon's biological parents, that would have been so intense for a child to experience. Actually, sorry, I'm just looking at the time. I think I'll open up for questions as well, because we do want to have a question and answer panel. So in the chat, if you want to, anyone in the chat would like to ask any questions to Dr. Lee or I, or other people in the chat as well, feel free to type them in, and then we can chat about them. Oh, and we'll try our best to answer them as well. That schema. I'm so grateful that you're here, Dr. Lee, to give a very quite scientific and technical viewpoint of the novel, because I very much just read it, enjoyed it and tried to relate to it as a simple man. But yeah, I thought it. I mean, it really does. It's background, it focuses on the science of sort of emotional learning and development, and a child going through that kind of difficulty. It focuses on this idea that, like you said, it's community and love. It really is important in the development of a human being.
Yes.
Oh, this is a nice question from Maria. She asks, have you read the book in its original language? I'm just curious how the translation compares.
Yes, can I ask? I mean, Harry, did you read?
Oh, no, please, Dr. Lee.
So I read 3 times then, because I read it in the original first. And then the translation is excellent.
Wow. So you read it in Korean and then English?
Yes, English twice, but in the original language. And then about steel wire, I would say barbed wire.
Oh, is that the only difference?
That is the only detail, but she did a very, very good job.
Oh, wow. Well, there you go. Maria, I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
And all these are really well. And then also I looked up what's the difference between ordinary and normal, and it was really well, beautifully translated.
Fantastic. Well, we should also give credit to the translator.
Yes.
For where is Translated by...
There was a translator's note at the end.
Oh, translated from the Korean by Sandy Juson Lee. Fantastic translation. That's fantastic.
Really good job. Yeah.
That's excellent. We also have a question from Alex. So Alex says, I've seen an interest in individuals who lack the typical capacity to relate to others in quite a few times in Korean dramas. Watched too many in lockdown. He's saying, I'm Not a Robot explores differences between AI and human beings. Flower of Evil, Psychopathy, Legend of the Blue Sea, Alice for Alexithymia, Good Doctor come to mind. I find this theme very interesting. Do you think it's something that especially interests Koreans?
What do you think? What do you think, Gary?
I think that it makes for really good TV. I think it allows for very interesting character clashes and interesting plots, because if you take something like the emotions and you sort of twist or change it in a specific way, I think the dramatic tension that you can create is very appealing. And I think Korean dramas have such a great knack for drawing out the drama and tension in situations.
You can see a lot of examples as I forgot his name. What's his name?
The person that asked the question?
Yeah.
Alex.
Alex, thank you for the question.
No worries.
I think that there are so many TV series or films about this. I mean, worse than Yunjae.
Yeah.
So what I think is about, because Korea is a patriarchal society, and actually that society brings about all these, I would say, people who are lacking in empathy. Yeah. And then most of the films or the dramas showing that the young men who are so selfish, but then a lot of difficulties and experience, they become quite empathetic. I remember one line says, "If you see others suffering, just look away." It was the motto. Okay, but then around 2 or 3 days, 3 years later, he experienced it, and then he becomes quite empathetic. Okay?
Yeah. Oh my God, it's sad that it has to come to that.
The other thing is, you remember about the mother or grandmother and other people on Christmas Eve?
Yes.
And the media was focusing on the perpetrator rather than the victims.
Yeah.
I think it's because of the patriarchal society.
Yeah.
If he was a woman, then it would not focus on him like that.
Yeah.
It's not just superficial kind of level, but I think. Yeah,
I think there's also a bit to be said about like a lot of diagnoses of these conditions. Like I've heard, for example, ADHD or the autism spectrum, a lot of the research was done on boys and men. Yes. And so there's a distinct lack there's a big hole in data and research for women and girls. And it's what a shame, because how you can't use that data in the same way. But
then there's a book called Genie Moon.
Genie Moon?
Yeah. It is a 2017 novel written by Benjamin Ludwig, actually in German, Ludwig maybe, the Beethoven's name.
I'll just write that in the chat.
It's a rare novel that has an autistic teenage heroine. Genie's first-person narration here, very similar to Almond.
Yeah.
She's 14 years old, and of course she's an unreliable narrator.
Right.
Reveals the gulf between her rich internal life and her ability to communicate with the outside world.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I would love to read that, because there isn't. I mean, the other book that was mentioned when I was doing a bit of research on this book was The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon, which is about a boy on the autism spectrum. And I think we do have a lot of fiction that focuses on boys and men going through this, but really, like, it's not the entire discussion. And we really, I think I would enjoy something different, and something fresh that can open up a perspective that I haven't considered. We've got more in the chat. Maria says, thank you. That's so cool to know. Sang Doi says, would love to read in Korean as well. Oh, please do.
Yeah.
Denise says maybe the book comments on whether trauma is the cause of these conditions rather than a condition that develops by itself. Oh, so like a trauma induced. Yeah.
I think he was born innate. I mean, innate.
He was born with it, but
Yeah.
I think that's certainly true for Gon, where his.
You mean the Yunjae?
No, when Denise says that trauma causes.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think he certainly was triggered by the trauma of his upbringing.
So it's nature versus nurture, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just another important theme of the book.
Yeah.
Charmaine Cruz says, Alex, there's beautiful mind too. Yes. Denise says, replying to Alex, I think Koreans and other Asian cultures are interested in themes about social norms and that the conditions are a method for exploring that rather than the condition.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, Dr. Lee, the women have to teach everyone. Yes, so true. Alex says, thank you for the comments. Insightful. Thank you, Matt. Matt says, great conversation. Camille says, seeing the world through Yunjae's point of view, who can't identify emotions, what was the most significant eye opener for you? Oh.
So it's about what?
So Camille asks, seeing the world through Yunjae's point of view, who can't identify emotions, what was the most significant eye opener for you? I think for me, the most eye-opening aspect is, I thought about how much we take for granted in terms of our socialization, and how we always do it. You assume the other person is equipped with at least a similar worldview or an experience to your own, but we don't consider those that would have a drastically different worldview than our own. And I think until you start at that point, you can't really have a strong connection with another person. Like, let's say, Yunjae, who has a very different worldview and experience. I think for me personally, as a high school teacher, I'm very grateful to have learnt in university for our special education course. And that was just the tip of the iceberg. But we had to do a practical teaching a few blocks, so a few weeks at a special education school, in order for us to know what it's like to teach students on the autism spectrum. And that was a huge eye-opener for me, because how could I even begin to teach students if I don't try to stand in their shoes or try and connect with them and see what it's like before my eyes instead of reading about it in a book? But I think books like this help me shift my worldview a little bit and accept other people more broadly. So that was definitely an eye-opening aspect, the idea that just because I experience emotions a certain way doesn't mean it's the same for others. And how would I even go about expressing these emotions to another person? And I should understand that it's very difficult. Denise says, Harry, also women get less diagnoses for autism and related conditions as they're conditioned to hide these and perform their social roles. Yes, I read about this as well. It is underdiagnosed, not only because it sort of presents differently, but also because of social norms, gender norms. You're right that they have learnt to mask it in a specific way, or rote learn social interactions in a way that we don't detect and we don't really look into. And I think it's a shame that we don't put more research into that. Seng Doi says, I have read Please Look After Mother by Shin Jong-suk. Did you read that in Korean, Seng? That's incredible. I know there is... Charmaine Cruz says, I know there is no black and white in dealing with the condition Yunjae has, but will you have some suggestions how to deal with such when we experience it, like with a friend or workmate? Do you have any advice, Dr. Lee?
Yeah, it's really hard, right?
Oh, that's very difficult.
Very difficult question.
I
think you said that already.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to be in their shoes, right?
Yeah, I think It's
It's a very hard question.
It is a difficult question, but it's also, I think, that's also what makes it a very important question. I think that establishing a dialogue, my rule of thumb is start with asking more questions than sort of and going at it in a more open way than assuming things. So again, with kids that I work with or teach at school, I constantly have to, and I'm definitely not perfect, but I constantly have to challenge my own understanding of social interactions. For example, I remember I had a student, and I was just, you do small talk. You say, "Oh, hey, how are you? How are you going?" And this student who was on the spectrum, I went up to him. I said, "Hey, how are you? How was your weekend?" And he goes, "Good." And then he just walked away. He just completely walked away. And I think automatically I would have thought, that's very rude. Why didn't finish talking to you? And I'm the teacher. But also, when I flip it a little bit, it's like he said all he had to say, and he might have found the conversation boring. And if that's the case, then okay. I mean, maybe he could have communicated that in a bit better way. But that doesn't mean that he's necessarily a rude person, especially if I have to consider that he's on the autism spectrum, and we present and express differently.
Yes, and then I think there's a study going on actually, because alexithymia was identified since 1970. So
wow.
about 3 decades of study, and then they still do not know whether alexithymia is associated with a theory of mind or mentalizing ability. It becomes really an increasingly important issue for research and clinical purposes.
Yeah.
So it actually literally means lacking words for emotion. It involves difficulty in identifying and describing one's own emotional state, as we know in Yunjae's case. But I think the clinical scientists are working on it, I think.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, fingers crossed.
Investigation into the role of mentalization in alexithymia may therefore shed light on how alexithymia is conceptualized, measured, and potentially treated. Okay, but personally, it's really a hard question. Thank you.
Yeah, so difficult, but thank you for asking. Catriona says, the butterfly part was quite brutal and sad because it was Gon's attempt to forcibly make Yunjae feel emotions and empathy. Do you think it was harder for Yunjae to familiarize himself with emotions when socialized in a darker way? Oh, another great question. Forced to socialize in a darker way.
So what does he mean by darker way?
I guess in a violent and more confrontational way. Possibly. They said when socializing.
So rather than you're thinking about the butterfly's pain, but then you are emphasizing the violence that Gon is doing on the butterfly, is it?
Yeah.
So
I think
Yunjae is more intelligent than that. Do you think? I don't know.
I feel like it was also a lot more pressure on Yunjae at the time as well, because he was confronted with a time limited scenario of Gon about to smash this butterfly. I'm not sure if it was harder because it was necessarily darker, but like the pressure that he might have been the pressure that would have been put on Yunjae to respond in a specific way when it's such a dramatic and confrontational situation. But I think, maybe it was more difficult because he's not used to that method of teaching, where in other cases where his mom or his grandma or Dr. Shim, they would often give hypothetical situations as opposed to situations that are right in front of him.
Yeah. Was he protected, actually? Yunjae was protected.
Yeah.
With all these people's love.
Yeah, that's right. It was a softer approach than smashing a butterfly, for sure. Camille says, I agree. Sometimes we have to put ourselves in other person's shoes to understand them. Well explained. Thank you for your response. No problem, Camille. I hope it made sense. Dr. Lee, Youngju Koo asks, could you speak to the present landscape of Korean literature gaining mainstream success in English-speaking countries and your thought on the level of appetite or interest there will be for Korean literature being exported overseas in the near/long-term future?
It's really broad, and it's a good question, but it's quite broad.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think because of the translation and all these kind of barriers that blocked the Korean literature to spread to the world, now is maybe less problem now. So there are so many masterpieces in Korea. I think they will do better in the future. I think, sorry, my answer is so short.
No worries. Oh, well, I mean, hopefully the Korean Cultural Center will discuss some of these masterpieces in the book club in the future. That would be great.
I think that the films are quite popular now, right?
Oh, yeah.
2 hour and things like that. But I think there should be some way to be more popular, and then there will be the way to be spread around the world, I think.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, the Korean... Oh, yes. Thank you so much for the question, Youngju. The Korean Film Festival is coming up soon, which I'm quite excited for, which hopefully, again, will up the popularity. Denise says, there's also the question of the ego. The behavior of others is not about you. Oh, for sure. Yeah. You totally have to shatter your own ego and take yourself out of the equation. I think I definitely suffer from that a lot, and I should learn to take myself out of the equation more. We've got Charmaine agrees and says, that's really true, Denise. Women in today's world a lot think everything is about me. Oh, we in today's world think a lot is about me. Yeah. Maria says, I think the difference with how his mum taught him compared to Gon was that his mum kind of gave him the answer for how to feel. For example, if someone gives you food, you smile and say thank you. Whereas Yunjae didn't know what reaction Gon wanted. Yeah, you're absolutely right. She presented him with options, or at least guided him very specifically. Whereas Gon just kind of said, well, what are you going to do about it? Which I don't even know what I would do.
But anyway, people are so different, right? So they're all individual.
That's right.
And then it's hard to just generalize.
Yeah, absolutely.
For training purposes, maybe, right?
Yeah, but thank you, Maria. That was a very good insight. Dr. Lee, Sarah asks, can you share with us some other Korean masterpieces which we should read? Fantastic question.
Mm-hmm. So, do you mean the books?
Yeah. I think, Sarah, is that right? Books?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. Yes.
I'm sorry, but my major is films. But then, have you read about the Kim Ji-young, born 1980?
Oh, yes. We actually did we did a book club about it. Was it the last one?
Were you there?
No, I wasn't. I did read because of the Korean Cultural Center, I bought the book and I read it. I love that book.
What I'm interested in is because I'm interested in Gwangju Massacre.
Oh, yeah.
What I read is Hangang's books.
I've read The Vegetarian by yeah. Hang on. I'll write this.
Her name is Hangang, yes.
Hangang. I'll write this down. So this was one of them, Sarah, and the other one was...
most of the Shin Kyung-suk is good, but I'm sorry because my major field is films and TV drama. So, yeah, I should read more books. Thank you.
Do you have any masterpiece films that you would recommend? There's so many, of course, sorry.
So what I'm interested in now is East Asian cinema.
Yeah.
So China and Japan and Korea, the cinemas. And then the other one is women's films in Korea. So these are fantastic. 2 projects now. So.
Is there anything we should look out for that might be coming out soon?
Coming out soon.
Or something that's come out recently that we should look out for in terms of like...
what kind of purpose?
Oh, just to enjoy?
Okay, there are so many, sorry.
Oh, so many? Well, that's exciting. That's really exciting. I'll keep my eyes peeled.
It depends on what you like. I mean, they have the taste, but what I always look at is about social critique, so it's quite violent.
Oh.
Not all of them like it, so... Yeah, the recent one is maybe Sinkhole or...
Sinkhole.
Yeah, sinkhole or the hostage.
Sinkhole and the hostage.
Yeah.
The hostage.
Something else. Yeah, so I cannot think about it now, but yeah.
That's okay. Fantastic.
I assure you that there are so many good films.
Oh yeah, I definitely want to check them out.
When you are looking at the remakes and the kind of the original kind of the place is to look at Korean films now.
Oh, okay.
Japanese.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, original Korean films. Fantastic. We've got Sarah says, thank you so much. We'll add these to my list. Okay. Melanie Hunter says, oh, sorry, did I skip? Sorry, I'm just catching up on the chat. Yongju Ku says, thank you, Dr. Lee. Absolutely agree. Please bring a Kyobo bookstore to Sydney. Yes, Kyobo Mungo. I would love one. That would be fantastic.
Kyobo does not take my credit cards. So
no.
I cannot get it. It's funny because I tried really hard, but they do not take Australian visas, I think.
Oh, well, hopefully they can fix that up so we can, buy their books. We want to buy them. Yes. Fatima says, thank you so much. This session has been really enlightening and eye-opening. Thank you for coming, Fatima. Denise recently had a terrible ebook experience with Kyobo. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Hopefully they can fix that. It sounds like their digital or the systems aren't quite up to date just yet. We've got, so Sarah says, thank you for those suggestions, and she'll add them to her list. And Melanie agrees that a Kyobo bookstore will be amazing in Sydney. That's right. Memories of a Murder, Bong Joon-ho. Yep, fantastic film. And Yongju says, in the epilogue, the author shares how the two characters of Yunjae and Gon came to be after she started to reflect on how she could give unconditional love to someone completely different from her expectations. I found the conception of these characters very interesting, yet very touching. I feel like I would relate to this at a closer level, having children of my own, but I thought that was definitely a powerful way to end the book. The conception of her characters, and this is her debut novel, I believe, as well. It came out in 2016, and it's quite incredible that she was able to create such a touching novel for her debut novel. Our next book club will be announced next week, I'm informed. Dina says, yes, The Vegetarian by Han Kang. I loved it. Yes, I loved it too. It's a great book. So the September book club will be held on the 23rd of September, everybody. And Denise asks, are there some interesting Korean Australian authors? Oh,
I knew Donald Lee, but then is he still
Donald Lee?
Donald Lee, but then is he still writing?
I'm not sure. What's the novel by Donald Lee?
I forgot. Sorry.
That's all right. I might look it up.
Donald Lee. Yeah. But I think it's about talking about 10 or 20 years ago. So, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't seem to find anything. Sorry. That would be. I would love for some Korean Australian authors to. I mean, there probably are, but unfortunately we don't know.
There are so many Korean American novelists, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. Harry Liam says, sounds like a great book. I wish I could get my son to read it, but he's usually too busy playing video games. Would this book appeal to teenage boys?
Yes, I think so. It's quite dramatic. And
yeah, I don't know if I can show you on camera. It's quite an easy read. Not to say that it's simple, but the pacing of the novel is quite quick, and I think it would appeal to him. But certainly it doesn't have the obstacles of like some other books that might make you want to drop it. I found myself, it would end on a chapter and I'd be like, oh no, we can't end there. I have to keep going. In saying that
his story ends after the stabbing, Yunjae affirms that it is a story about learning empathy.
Yeah.
But then he's rewarded by an unexpected reunion with his mother.
Yeah.
Who has come out of her long coma. So we might find this rather unexpected and some sentimental touch, but if you have watched much Korean TV melodrama, you recognize it as a staple narrative motif that Won-pyung is drawing on. So Australian boy would not appreciate it, maybe.
Oh yeah. It does have those sort of cultural touchstones of Korean drama. Yeah.
Korean readers will perhaps find it more acceptable than many Australian readers might.
Yeah. Carrie Hughes says, "Thank you so much for this opportunity. I found it interesting and can't wait to find out the next book." Thank you, Carrie. Thank you for joining us. And Sona says, I wonder which book will be chosen for the September book club. Oh yes, I'm looking forward to that too. Youngju says, "Yes, love Korean American authors, especially Min Jin Lee." There's another one to look out for, everybody. Min Jin Lee. I'm going to write that down. Korean American.
There are so many Korean Americans, right?
Yeah, fantastic. KCC says, "We know one Australian Korean children's book writer." Oops, sorry, I've just got to scroll. Sona S says, "The short chapters and the cliffhangers make it easy to continue reading." Yes, I agree. Harry says, "Thanks, Harry. By the way, getting good as a reply from a teenage boy is very good. Get good." I hope he does give the book a go.
I have been thinking about this word. I have word of aphasia or whatever. But I want to say solipsistic.
Solipsistic, yeah.
Yes, that's what people are actually. Solipsistic. The word is all about me. Right?
That's right. Yeah. Oh, of course, yeah. And we have phases of like stepping out of ourselves and going back in. And then the unfortunate, it's still self-centered. You know how we can only truly begin to empathize once the bad thing happens to ourselves directly. And it's selfish to think that that's what it takes to be able to empathize. But you're right. Solipsistic is a great word. The September book is selected. It's The Calligrapher's Daughter, everybody.
Oh, okay. I have it actually.
I'm writing this down. I can grab it. Calligrapher's Daughter. I can't wait to read it. Julie Toe says, "A few years ago, Irene, Red Velvet member, was seen holding the book." Oh, Red Velvet, the K-pop group? Okay, Irene from Red Velvet was seen holding the book Kim Ji-young 1982, and then she got a lot of hate from men for supporting supporting feminism. This makes me curious about how Koreans responded to when this book came out.
Did you say that this book was read by and recommended by BTS member?
Yeah, this one was. It was read by Rap Monster and one other member, I forget, but there's footage of them reading it. Yeah. And so I'm glad to have one more thing in common with Rap Monster from BTS. That's okay. The children's book writer is Lim-myo. Okay. KCC, which author? I think that's the one, Denise, that they were referring to. Thanks, everyone. Looking forward to next time and events related to the film festival. Thanks. Fantastic. And Melanie says, "Yes, Youngju, I agree. Pachinko." Oh, Pachinko. Fantastic book. I loved it. Thank you so much for this book club. I'm excited for the next one. So glad to have found out about it. Sorry, guys. Oh, Sugar. I'm sorry. Sorry, guys. It was Sugar and Rap Monster who read. I don't want to, anger the army. That's my bad. Sorry. Just on that last question, Red Velvet. The Irene who read Kim Ji-young. I'm not certain. I mean, it is quite horrible that she had to face hate for reading a novel.
There's a film too.
There's also a film. I really hope that we can progress and get past that kind of response or negative response to someone enjoying a very good book. So we're going to wrap it up tonight. Dr. Lee, thank you so much for coming, and I really appreciate your insights. We are going to announce the 10 winners of the KCC is going to give 10 copies of Almond Out to 10 people tomorrow. So that'll happen tomorrow. And we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. It was so fun, and I really enjoyed everyone's insights and chat. Please follow the KCC on Facebook and Instagram to check out the future events. The next book club will happen next month. Please look out for that. A month is plenty of time to read the next book. It's The Calligrapher's, The Calligrapher's Daughter. So we can all spend that month reading it and joining the next book club. My name was Harry Jun. A special thanks again to the Korean Cultural Center for having us. Have a lovely weekend, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.